So this week we're talking about sentencing goals and structures and how if we do actually go through the adjudication process and the trial process, what sentencing is going to look like. So sentencing can be sometimes complex. Offenders are not, the sentencing offenders is not as simple as it appears often. There are many types of sentencing schemes or ideas, and at sentencing, a punishment is imposed on the offender convicted of the crime. Punishment is a sanction imposed following a criminal conviction. The primary function of sentencing in adult procedures includes punishment of the offenders for the crimes that have been committed, with the hope of deterring them from committing future crimes. For most crimes, minimum and maximum penalties have been determined either by state or by legislation. So think about it this way. If you didn't get any punishment for stealing candy, would you do it again? Well, hopefully, morally, you would say, no, I wouldn't, because I know it's not right. But maybe you don't have that moral compass, or you haven't been taught that that's not okay. And so you do it once and you don't get punished for it. You're probably more likely to do it again. Similarly so with other types of criminal actions. Sentencing offenders serves the following functions. So it helps with crime control, retribution, rehabilitation, restoration, and then prevention or deterrence, which is what we talked about in the previous slide. The earliest forms of punishment embodied retribution, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. The notion was to represent the functional ideas of retribution. So if you took this from society, you were going to owe that back, tenfold. The goals of punishment under a retributable ideal are justified because the offender has committed the wrongful act. Doesn't necessarily mean what they did it. It just means they did it. Incapacitation and crime control aims at sentencing to incapacitate those convicted individuals. So we want to keep those persistent offenders off the street. This is where three-strike laws type come in. Special statutes also exist for chronic offenders, again, to eliminate the ability to do it. Career criminals are defined as those who make a living through their crime. Usually these occur over the lifetime of the offender. Oftentimes we see it in drug cases. There's a lot of habitual offenders, even rape cases. But normally you're looking at career criminals being able to make money off their crimes. So selling, distribution, things like that. And then a person who continues to commit new crimes after being convicted is a little bit different because they're just a career criminal in the context of being incarcerated, not necessarily making a living, which is very similar to persistent felony offenders, which are habitual offenders who commit felonies at a higher rate than the average criminal. Rehabilitation is intended function of punishment is rehabilitation. This is obviously big in juvenile courts. It's also pretty large in drug courts, trying to get the person clean and get them off the street so that they're able to be a productive member of society. Restoration is more of a holistic approach. Restorative justice ideals aim at repairing the harm that occurred as a result of the criminal act. It focuses more on the victim and less of the offender, and it helps justice be served for the individual victim and not so much as a punishment for the offender. Victim-offender mediation model is a meeting between the two parties where a third party, such as a judge or attorney, decides what's best for the parties. All parties must agree to the decision of the third-party arbitrator. This is often like a shopkeeper and somebody who steals from them. You don't normally see this in, sexual assaults or anything like that. And then prevention or deterrence, again, convicted offenders, we want to deter them deter them from committing crimes again. One direction intention of the Get Tough movement is to mete out harsher penalties for offenders to set examples and deter others. So if you're going to get 2 years in jail for stealing a candy, you're definitely going to be a lot less likely to do it. But is that punishment meet the act? Maybe not necessarily so. Crime prevention obviously plays a big part in deterrence. And the actions are designed to prevent crime before it occurs by threatening penalties, sanctions, getting it out there, having more security systems, greater police presence, acts like that. And then reintegration deals with bringing criminals back into the system, rehabilitating them, reintegrating them so that they are ready to adjust to outside life. This is incredibly important into our system today, because criminals often are not able to enter society and then in turn become career criminals. Forms of sentencing, again, we went through. And determinate sentencing basically just means it's imposed by the judge. There could be a minimum term and a maximum term. And they may be released early by the parole board depending on their crime and what time they've already served. The parole board, often, I know in your introduction, some of you have a big interest in going into parole. The parole board is appointed by the governors or other elected officials, and they determine whether or not the currently incarcerated person should be granted parole or early release. And then a determinate sentencing is a fixed sentence. So 25 years to life. You're required to get that for a specific crime. No parole board discretion on the release dates. You could get good time credit, but that would essentially be it. Good time credit is the amount of time deducted from the period of incarceration of a convicted offender. It was introduced in the 1800s, and we can still use it today. And then presumptive sentencing is a fixed punishment for each criminal offense, graduated accordingly to the offense. So punishments for different offenses are ranged according to months, and punishment range midpoints are the presumptive number of months imposed according to a fixed table. Sorry, I needed to take a drink of water. The fixed table has to do with sentencing guidelines. It was developed to help assist judges and other magistrates in deciding the sentencing and the incarceration times to help uniform jurisdictions. The U.S. Sentencing Commission is a body originated from the Sentencing Reform Act in 1984, and it promulgated sentencing guidelines for all federal crimes, so again, helping be unified over all the districts within federal courts. We've covered this a little bit. Mandatory sentencing, obviously, there has to be a mandatory, and you would have to receive that for the crime. And then life without parole. It's imposed as a maximum punishment in states that do not have the death penalty, and it provides for permanent incarceration of the offender. Without parole eligibility, early release may be attained through good time credits, but it's a lot more stringent than, say, a different type of crime. Habitual offender statutes, again, third strike law, things like that, to encourage them to not return and be incarcerated. Three strikes law. A felony is a felony is a felony. Some states have attempted to limit the types of offenses that qualify under the habitual offender status and the three strikes law. Some have distinguished it to committing violent crimes, which they've defined as rape, murder, aggravated assault, armed robbery, and serious felonies, drug dealing, robbery, larceny, petty theft, burglary. I apologize, not petty theft, vehicular theft. In theory, at least, the most serious and persistent felons will be given 25 years to life, while the less serious felons will receive a shorter sentence for that. And then the Truth in Sentencing Bill in 1994 provides money to the state that change their sentencing provisions in the direction of harsher sanctions. For instance, convicted offenders prior to this could have served 40 to 55% of their sentence, and now they're going to receive 85% of their sentence. And that is it.